Hello, Soundies. Welcome to our Sound for Video session. Today is the 27th of March, 2022. Got that wrong earlier today. I'm so glad to have all of you joining us here today, and hope you're as excited as I am to learn about the Zoom F3. A lot of people have been asking about it, and mine arrived just on Thursday, so I've done a little bit of testing, a little bit of work with it, and excited to share with you what I've learned so far and answer any questions that you may have. So let's jump over to our agenda and take a look at what we have for today. So first up, let me tell you about the signal chain here. This will be important, especially later when we start doing sound samples with the Zoom F3. I want to distinguish we're not using the Zoom F3 yet. So let me be very clear about that. I am using the Earthworks Ethos microphone. That's what I'm talking into right here that you see just in front of me. That is going into the Shelford channel, which is a preamplifier, an EQ, and a compressor. That is sending its signal out to the Canon C70 camera, and then that's going to the ATEM Mini Extreme, and then that's going to the Epiphan Video Pearl 2. I'm working on a video for the Pearl 2, which is essentially a live stream or a streaming appliance, I think is the best way to put it. So it does a little bit of everything. It does switching, it does encoding, so on and so forth. So that's what you're hearing right now. A little bit later, we're going to switch over to the Zoom F3 so you can hear that in contrast to what we're listening to right now. All right, just a reminder as well, we've done this the last couple of weeks, but I just want to remind you, we do have coming up probably sometime later in April or early May, our Dialogue Edit Mix Master Challenge. So the idea with this is that you can submit a 30-second mix that you've done, primarily dialogue, I would say, and we will have a couple of people from the industry, people some of you may already know of, that will be able to come and take a listen to what you've done. You'll list out what you did in terms of processing the audio and how you recorded it, and they will have some suggestions for you to help make it even better. So it's a good opportunity to, instead of just sitting on your couch, to actually practice working on sound, recording sound, and mixing sound. So looking very much forward to that. Thanks to Rob Christensen, who is putting that together for us. Greg Palmer was kind enough to send over a link to me in the Ukraine. Was under attack from Russia right now. There is a sound mixer who is put together a program called Safe and Sound Ukraine. And what they are doing is they're collecting money to provide walkie-talkies to first responders and aid workers in Ukraine to help with the situation there. So if that is of interest to you, please check that out over on Facebook. You can go to Facebook and then just type in Safe and Sound Ukraine. You'll find their page and all the details on that if you're interested in that. All right, and then of course, next up we're going to talk about our Zoom F3, which is a new 32-bit float audio recorder, very small recorder. And then we'll come back. We got a few questions that were submitted ahead of time, and then we'll go to the chat for any questions there. So let's go ahead and go to the Zoom F3, and let me give you a little overview there. So first of all, just to give you a sense, this is an iPhone 12, the big iPhone, whatever they call those, I don't remember. iPhone 12 Max, Pro Max, something or other, just for comparison. But let me give you another size comparison here. This is the Zoom F6 next to the Zoom F3, just to give you a sense. If you've ever seen the Zoom F6, that'll give you a sense there. And then in terms of the side profiles, that's what they look like there. So the screen is a little bit bigger on the F6, of course. But let me give you another comparison here that may be helpful. I've got a lot of devices here. Oh, whoa, I almost lost that. For comparison here, we have a Zoom F8N Pro, same size as the Zoom F8N. This is the new 32-bit float version of the F8N. And just for comparison, size-wise. So hopefully that gives you some sense of size and scale here.
They asked for comparison with a banana.
With a banana?
We don't have any.
We don't have any bananas in this room, I'm afraid. However, perhaps in our review we can include a banana to give you a good sense. However, bananas vary greatly in size as well, so I'd be wary of that. But I appreciate, whoops, I just bumped the stand. Apologies for that. So sorry for the motion. Okay, let's run through the Zoom F3. So we are not listening to it now, but let me just kind of give you a tour here. On this end here, we have two XLR inputs. They are XLR only. There's not enough room in this device for the combination jacks, so you will need XLR, no 1/4 inch. Inputs 1 and 2, they are locking. Are they Neutrik connectors? It doesn't look like they are. I don't think they typically use Neutrik on their devices. On the top here, of course, we have a little LCD screen. It is backlit with sort of a blue. You'll see that in a minute. We have 4 buttons across the front here for controlling the settings, making changes there. On this side, it does use micro SD cards, and I believe it uses micro SDXC, so you can get some of the larger, newer cards to do that. There is a USB-C port. This can power the device with a USB battery bank, or it also allows you to connect it to your computer or a mobile device to use it as an audio interface. So basically to be able to record XLR-based microphones into your mobile device. We also have 3 buttons here, transport buttons. Press this one for play, pause, this one to stop, and this one to get into the menu system. On this side here, we've got our line output, 3.5mm TRS. It's hard to see that with the light here. We have our headphone jack and our volume buttons, kind of a rocker button here for volume for the headphones. On this side, we have a port here. This is where the Bluetooth adapter goes. Zoom has done this on a lot of their recent devices. They started with, I think the first one I saw it on was the Zoom F6, but it's carried over now to some of the other devices, including the PodTrack P4 has that, and the Zoom H8, and now the Zoom F3. Power button here, and then a slider switch here, which is a lock. You can press it, go that way to hold, or you go to the right to start or stop a recording. So the hold just locks all the buttons so that you don't accidentally bump something while you're in the midst of a recording. In terms of build, I think that the gray parts here are metal, and then the black part is plastic. We have these sort of belt loops here, so you can attach it to a belt if you wanted to do that. And I thought I saw in their marketing materials they had someone wearing it on their wrist, kind of like a really big smartwatch. Clean off those fingerprints there. Okay, on the bottom here, of course, we have batteries. It's powered by 2 AA batteries. In this case, I'm using these lithium rechargeable cells here. In true Zoom fashion, unfortunately, this little door here is a very kind of thin, flexible plastic. Hopefully it's not too brittle, and hopefully it holds up okay. Battery door seems to be a real challenge for Zoom. I don't know why that's the case there. We have a 1/4 inch screw tap there, so you can attach it. Although these little bits right here, the 2 belt loops, can get in the way there. I had trouble. I was going to try and put this on my Sound Devices Pix bass stand, but I couldn't fit it because the part that fits here was too wide. So that's kind of the physical overview. Let's go ahead and turn it on. So I'm going to go ahead and power it up here. And I haven't figured out how it works exactly. It's like, there it goes. Okay. If you hold it too long, it won't power on. If you don't hold it long enough, it doesn't power on. Now, the first thing you'll notice here is that it's hard to tell what are we seeing. The Zoom F3 is unique from the standpoint that it does not use traditional audio meters. In fact, what it does do is, I'm going to go ahead and plug in some microphones here. Okay. Now, as I move this microphone a little bit closer, I just want to get some signal level in there so you can see. So it shows this sort of animated waveform for channel 1 and channel 2. So this will be my mic. This will be Danny's mic over here.
Hi.
Okay.
This is Danny's mic.
We're not hearing it yet. Again, not yet, but what I'll do is I'll go ahead and connect the line output. This line output right here is going into the ATEM Mini, so that'll be feeding into the stream in just a minute when we start giving you some audio samples here. So what's interesting here is you don't have meters. So how do you set your levels? Well, You don't have a gain input setting either, or a gain setting. So there's nothing to control the amount of amplification that you're sending to the recording itself, which is interesting. So I think really from the start, what Zoom appears to be doing is making this super, super simple for people that, I would say, for example, solo operators, like a documentary filmmaker who has this on their camera rig and they don't have, they're focused on getting the picture. So for them, worrying about sound is something they don't want to have to do. So it's going to be for scenarios like that. I think it's also a very convenient field recorder. So if you're just going to go, if you're going to go get sound effect recordings or Foley or nature recordings, anything like that, and you want a really small package and you just need 2 microphones, this could be a great option there as well. So it's kind of a different approach. What you do have, and I'm going to go ahead and put in the Bluetooth adapter here so I can show you on the phone. Actually, let's pop this in. Part of the reason I'm not super fond of having a Bluetooth adapter is that can pop out without too much trouble. So it can do 2 things. You'll notice there. It either said you could use it for Bluetooth control. Let me go ahead and turn on the app so that it can connect. It is searching, it found it. Let's go ahead and connect. Now it's going to work on connecting. You can also use this for time code. So it does not have an inbuilt time code generator, but what it does do is it has this Bluetooth adapter. It's about a $40 add-on. And what that allows you to do is connect via Bluetooth to what used to be time code systems, which is now Atomos. They have a little time code generator called the UltraSync Blue. And so it can connect via Bluetooth. So you could use that to implement Bluetooth or implement timecode if you need to do that. All right. You can see on the app here, we have some controls, not everything. So if I go into the menu here, I've got a finder, I've got a recording menu. I can set the date and time and I can look at the versions. So not a lot going on in here. So if I just want to look at the existing recordings, I can pop in here. And that's what I have on the SD card currently. You'll notice, actually, let me go back in there. There are a couple ways it can name them. Right now, it's naming them by date. So it's year, month, day, and then file number for that day. Or if you're recording multiple tracks, it'll also have appended to the end the track number 1 or track number 2. And you can record it as a stereo into a single dual channel track, or you can have the 2 tracks recorded to separate files if you prefer. So it can do it either way. Not a bad deal. And the recording menu, here's where you can choose how it, the name that it uses. And again, I just have it set to date, but you can also just put in your own user-defined names if you wanted to, and it will just increment from there. Sample rates. We're currently at 48 kilohertz. You can go up to 192 kilohertz. If you do go up to 192 kilohertz, there are some limitations in terms of how long the pre-record will record. So for those that are not familiar with that feature, if I start a recording by pressing this slider forward or on the app, what happens is with pre-record, if I tap that, I'll just go ahead and do that, it'll take the 6 seconds before that and also record that into the file. And if you go up to 192 kilohertz, you only get 1 second of pre-record, just as an FYI, just in case that was an important feature for you. So an important thing to keep in mind. Let's see here. So right now I have pre-record off. You can see if I turn it on, actually it doesn't show in the menus here. I had to actually look in the user manual to figure out how much time you get for recording when you go to the higher sample rates. All right, those are the main things I wanted to cover there. What you don't have, for example, is access to the output menu, I don't think. So you can control the volume of the headphones right here, but I don't think there's any way to get into the output menu from the app as far as I've found yet. So I'd still be looking for that. But let me just disconnect the app so we can show you that output menu. Pop this off. Okay, so if I go into the menu here, you'll see the similar thing. So we've got the Finder, the recording menu, and let's go into the output menu. So you have headphone alert volume. So when you start a recording or stop a recording, pause a recording, you get a little alert in your headphones just to let you know that you've pressed a button. That's what that's all about, and you can set the volume for those. You can set the line out level, and what's cool about this is this allows you to calibrate the level that you're outputting here to your camera or whatever other device you're sending the audio to. So here, for example, I can start the tone. You're not hearing this yet, and again, I don't want to play that for you, but the tone is being sent out at -6 dB full scale. All right, and so if we switch on over to our Mac here, if I put the fader at 0, there we go, you can see our levels are coming at about -6. Now, if we go back to the overhead camera, to get to that, I had to increase the output from the zoom by 6 dB. So that's how we calibrated those two. So what that does is it makes it so that as long as I'm not exceeding 0 dB on the Zoom F3, which, by the way, kind of hard to tell because you don't really have meters, it should not clip on the device that I'm sending the audio to via the line output, in this case, the ATEM. So I'm going to just have to kind of keep my eyes on the ATEM, but there is also another feature here, which is nice. I'm going to go ahead and turn the tone off now. So we'll pop back out of that menu. There's a line output limiter, really important for a 32-bit float recorder that doesn't have a gain setting, to have something like that, and I'm glad they put that in. So it's just a matter of turning it on or off. Right now it's off. Let's go ahead and turn that on. I don't know all the specs on that, so we're going to have to watch that.
What are you pressing down at the bottom?
What am I pressing?
Yeah, is that a...
Yeah, so it's a line of 4. So Danny asks, what am I pressing down at the bottom? So you can't see it very well in the picture here, but it's a line of 4 buttons. And it tells you what each button does here at the bottom of the screen.
Okay, thanks.
So that's what that's about. Okay, so let me go back out and talk a little bit about what else we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and turn Bluetooth back on because it's easier to see on the app. Come back into the app. Go ahead and select F3 control. Okay, not working. Let's go back in, see if it catches it this time. There we go. Found it that time. It is connecting. Okay, so what's interesting about the Zoom F3 is that it doesn't have a gain control for the inputs, so you never set the gain. It also doesn't have a fader, at least not in the traditional sense. And so the question is, well, how do I control the levels that are, how do I get things up to a level where I'd like them so that I can send a decent signal out to my camera or to my ATEM or, whatever I'm doing to another mixer? How do I do that? Well, you do have over here on the app on the right-hand side, you can change the amplification level, and that's only changing the levels that are sent to the line output and the headphone output. It is not changing the recorded level. Okay? So that's really important. What that means in practical terms for the Zoom F3 is that when you make a recording on the Zoom F3, you are going to have to adjust its levels in post. There is no way to change those levels with the recorder itself while you're recording. The only thing you get to control the levels of is the output level for the line out and the headphones. Okay, so they're really kind of dialing in a particular workflow here. So if that's not the workflow you want, then this is probably not the device for you. There are other, probably the Zoom F8M Pro would probably be a better fit, and we'll talk about that in future weeks here. That just arrived on Friday. So let's go ahead and get you a sample of what this all sounds like. So actually, before I do that, so what you have over here to control the output levels for the line out and the headphones is you have this amplification setting here. And right now I have my channel set to times 32 and Danny's set to times 24. Now, why do I have Danny set so high? That's actually the highest setting. Danny is going to be using a Shure SM7B, so dynamic microphone that requires a ton of gain. And so we had to bump her levels up quite a bit. I'm going to be using a condenser microphone, the Earthworks SV33. So you can see I don't need nearly as much amplification here. So let's go ahead and switch on over to the Zoom F3 so you can hear what that sounds like. So give me just a moment here. Let's switch back out to the main camera here. Okay. So now you should be hearing me on the Earthworks SV33. That's this one over here. And Danny, let's hear you.
Hi, this is me talking on the Shure SM7B.
Okay, good. Good job. Good mic technique.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're both being careful with our headphones here. It's really weird. There is a latency because, of course, we're going through the ATEM and we're monitoring at the end of the signal chain or right before it's sent to the encoder. So there's this weird delay, and it makes you sound like you are talking really slowly because you get kind of disoriented. All right, let's go back to the overhead camera here and take a look at what things look like while we're doing this. So you can see I'm definitely being picked up in your microphone, and
I think I'm being picked up by your microphone too.
yeah, a little bit. All right. So that's what you'll use when you're doing any sort of, if you were to use this for live, which again, it's not really made for that. I mean, you could kind of make this work. But what I would probably prefer is a Zoom F4, a Zoom F6, a Zoom F8N, Zoom F8N Pro, where it has the auto mix feature. So it would actually be pulling Danny's mic down while I'm talking. And then when she's talking...
Sorry, I keep forgetting to take my headphones off. So as now I'm talking into my mic.
Yeah, so she's being picked up a little bit by my microphone. Of course, you can use microphone technique, position the microphones, use the cardioid or whatever type of polar pattern you have to help eliminate or reduce the amount of Danny that I'm picking up in my microphone and the amount of me that we're picking up in Danny's mic. But it would be nice to have that auto mix as well if you're doing something live like a podcast or a live stream or something like that. So that is just a note there. But this is what it looks like. You have all your transport controls here, so I could start a recording and I could drop markers at various points. That's especially useful for, I think a lot of times maybe sound effects recordists, if they're out in the field, if they want to drop a marker really quickly to indicate that, here's where you want to take a look. I just heard something really interesting. Or a podcaster might use something like that to mark a particular part of the show, things like that. So some interesting things there. It also shows you the type of battery that you're using, your battery status, how much time you have left on your recorder, the recording media, so your SD card. You have the settings for each of the inputs here. So if I wanted to change something here, I could do that. You can see right now I have a high pass filter on at 50 hertz. You have a phase invert if you needed that for some reason. If you were being picked up by a couple of microphones or you were doing a stereo recording and maybe there was some phase going on, you could invert the phase there. And you can also apply an input delay, which is nice. So if you are doing live, and you have this connected maybe to your computer and you need to apply a delay. In fact, if we go back to the Mac really quickly, Danny's going to take us there. You'll notice I do have a 4-frame delay right now on this particular mic. This is the Zoom F3 input right here. And I had to apply a little bit of a delay to get things back in sync. So if you didn't have something like that, like many cameras don't, if we come back to the overhead, you could instead dial that in here on the recorder itself. So you could delay the input actually, and you'd have to delay all of your inputs, whichever you're using for that stream. And you can delay it by up to, I believe, let's see what it goes to. Oh, only 30 milliseconds. So it's not a ton. I don't have a ton of room to play with things there, but there is some room there. So that can help a little bit. All right, so those are the input menus. Of course, you can arm or disarm either of them. So if I wanted to, disarm Danny's mic really quickly. Oh, wait, so you can't do it while you're recording. Let's go ahead and stop the recording. Okay, now Danny's mic is disabled and it's just my mic, or
my mic.
Your mic's working and mine is disabled.
Right. So now you should be hearing me talking through this Shure SM7B with the syncing mic stand.
Yeah. Okay, so, all right, I'm back on my mic. I've disabled Danny's mic. Go ahead and pull that up. So it's syncing the weight of the Shure SM7B, the mighty, no, don't loosen it, just pull it up. There you go. Okay. The weight of the Shure SM7B makes this cheap stand sync over time. And by sync, I don't mean synchronize, I mean actually dip its boom arm. So, all right, so we'll go ahead and enable Danny's mic again. All right, any questions in the chat? Let's go back to the main camera and see what we've got in the chat here. Danny's mic is live as well. We can see if you have any questions or things you wanted to know about that we haven't covered yet.
Somebody said do the palm comparison from last night again.
Do the palm okay, if we go back to the overhead camera. Well, this is, keep in mind, I have enormous hands. I should have been a basketball player, but I'm not. But there it is in the palm of my hand, if that's helpful for you. So that's what it looks like there. Okay, let's go see what else we've got in the chat here.
Let's see.
If there's anything you're curious about, now it's a great time to talk and let us know.
Okay, so here's a comment. Whoa, zoom on SD stand combination has been known for spontaneous combustion.
The entire Zoom F6 course was recorded on the Sound Devices PixBase stand, and nothing incinerated or caught on fire. So it's actually possible if you're very careful.
Somebody asked if you plan to review the Zoom F8N Pro.
Do I plan to review the Zoom F8N Pro? And the answer is yes, I do. I think it's probably going to be a pretty short review because I don't think a lot's changed. Basically, the change is 32-bit float recording. So it'll probably be a pretty quick review. But yeah, definitely planning on doing that. Would no gain adjustment make it a bit troubling as an audio interface, let's say for live streams? Well, that's a great question. So let me show you what I'm doing for live streams. So you saw what we did earlier. If we go back to the overhead camera here, you saw, for example, here that we are using the amplification feature here, which is not super fine grained, but that does allow us to at least, get reasonable levels between Danny and I. And then if we go over to the Mac, here I'm running the mixer for the ATEM. So I do have a fader for both of them right here. And in fact, I can send them as stereo and actually break them out into separate channels if I wanted to do that as well. So I could actually get a fader for each of them if I chose to do that. So you do have some options, but if you're not using something like an ATEM, it could be a little bit problematic, definitely. So yeah, it's not purpose built for doing live types of things, but you could probably make it work if it was, if it was a really useful device for you in other scenarios, and you also wanted to use it for live streams, you could potentially make it work, but it's not ideal for those circumstances. Okay, what else have we got here? Christopher, if you feed it via linear timecode, say the second XLR, will it process that and write timecode metadata, or your post-work app needs to understand the linear timecode? The latter. So it doesn't understand timecode. If you can feed it via one of its XLR inputs, but it just records it as sound, and then your post app would have to take care of converting that to metadata. So, Vincent, both the F8 app and the F6 app do not let you control the output menu, unfortunately. I don't understand why. Wish they would. And this one doesn't either, the F3. So it's a pattern for some reason. Jan, are there any benefits to the Bluetooth dongle being a separate attachment rather than built in? I feel they've developed this technology and it was too invested to just justify not using it. I don't know all of the details, but I believe that it's probably, if I had to guess, and this is just a guess, that it's probably a cost. It's a way to keep the price under control. So if you don't need the Bluetooth capability, you buy the Zoom F3 for $350 US, and you're good. If you do want the Bluetooth feature, then you pay another $40 to get the dongle. So just one way they do it. I think you have to keep in mind that Zoom is very much a consumer electronics company, whereas if you compare it to something like Sound Devices, for example, Sound Devices is coming from a very different market. It originally provided tools, kits for professionals, very much professionals, in the film world. And so now they have the Mix Pre, which is a little bit more prosumer oriented, and their point of view was, we just build the radio in, and yeah, the price is going to be higher, substantially higher. It's probably a number of things that make the price higher, but that's one of them. So Yeah, I think that there's probably, my guess is that's what they're doing, is trying to save that cost to keep the price as low as possible. Because a consumer electronics company, in many instances, are really trying to compete on price. So, Sonoga, is there a delay from the XLR input to the output of the Zoom F3? I haven't tested that, Sonoga. I don't know the answer to that. I imagine there is something of a delay. I don't know if it has a. I would imagine what happens is the audio comes in, the analog inputs, it gets converted to digital. It does whatever processing you have set. So if you have a high pass filter, it will take care. It'll do that. If there's a phase invert, it'll do that. In fact, we'll take a look in just a minute at the block diagram, which is very interesting. And then it will convert it back to analog to play of the output. So there probably is some level of a latency. I don't know how big it is. It's probably not very big. But let's do this. Let's go over to our Mac here, and we're going to take a look at the block diagram. If I pop over here. So if you've never seen one of these before, this lets you know how they have things laid out in the product itself. And so what you have here is you have your inputs over here. They go through the analog to digital converters. They go through a DC cut if that's set. I don't even know what that is to be 100% sure. Then they go through a high pass filter. So if you have the high pass filter turned on, they will work through that. They'll invert the phase. Then there's the waveform application. So again, that's remember we have the times 32 or X32 and the times 1024 settings on ours. That's what that is. If you apply any sort of delay, that was the setting that we showed in the recording menu or the output menu. No, it's the recording menu, right? Let me go take a look here. Go back to the overhead really quickly. That was in the recording menu. No. It must be the output menu, so on the device itself. Okay, back to our block diagram. It then displays the waveform, and then from there, it gets recorded to track left and right. It also gets sent over here. If you have it set to mono or stereo, it configures it that way, and then it sends it to the line output. So here's a delay as well. Interesting, so there's a delay on the output, and it shows a delay over here on the input as well. And I thought there was a longer delay, and that actually might be what's happening. So let's go back to the F3 here. I'm going to pull the dongle out. We're going to pop into our menu. Let's go into the output menu. There is a line out delay, and this is where you can get a much longer delay here. So this is where I believe you can go up to 400 milliseconds, which is very. Oh, stand by. Go back to the main camera. 1 second. Am I still cutting out? 1 second. Okay, I'm back on my main microphone here. I think when you get into the menus, things start doing weird stuff, weird things. Good to know. So we were getting some cut out. Let's go back to the overhead camera. So I was showing that you can apply an output delay as opposed to an input delay. So the output delay would be useful for getting things lined up in a live stream kind of situation or a live podcast. You can apply up to 400 milliseconds. The input delay would be more useful for latency that you experience in cases, for example, if you have a boom microphone, which is connected via wire, and a digital wireless system, which is also connected to the other input, you probably want to apply a delay to the wired boom microphone because the digital wireless system will have a latency. For example, the Sennheiser AVX has a 19 millisecond latency. So you would put in a 19 millisecond latency on the boom microphone's input delay to get it in line with the digital wireless on the other channel. So that's what you can do there. All right, let's go back to the main camera here and see what other questions we might have in the chat. Move this microphone now. All right, here, supplemental seminary. I'm hearing a hiss. And maybe something that is a little hot in the signal chain might be the noise of the room. Yes, there's definitely noise in this room. There's a fan in the ATEM Mini here. There's a fan in the camera, the main camera. And yes, I definitely hear a hiss. So wait for the, when we do the review, we'll have a cleaner recording. Actually, let's actually go over to the Mac and I will show you a recording that we have there. This will be helpful for you, I think. All right, what I'm gonna do before we do that, let's go back in and I'm going to adjust the fader here. Here's a recording made in a quieter space. So this is out in my sound blanketed studio area. Let me just play a little bit of this, and then we'll also play the part over on the right here. You can see over here, some of that got clipped. So we'll see what happens as far as pulling that back. That's the magic, of course, of 32-bit float. And for those that didn't catch it, a few weeks ago, we did a Sound for Video session focused on 32-bit float audio. And so you can, I'll put a link for that in the description after here. You can go check that out for all the details on how it works. Here's a playback of that recording. Here's a sample recording. I am using the Rode NTG5 into the Zoom F3 audio recorder. I have the magnification level set to times 16, excuse me. And this is, it's looking like healthy waveforms, I think, but it's really hard to tell. So I'm going to drop it down. Okay, we're now at ×1, and I can see a difference in the waveform itself. And so what this means is it's only changing what's playing back to the headphone amplifier and to the line output. What's being recorded is not changing at all. So that's interesting. Let's go ahead and bump it up now. And I'm going to take it to +1024. So now it looks entirely clipped on the waveform, on the screen itself. Again, we don't really have a meter. We don't even have markings on the waveform, so we don't know what the amplitude is, just that it's looking like if it were a 16 or 24-bit recording, that it would be entirely clipped right now. Let's go ahead and drop it back down to ×8, and that looks like a healthy waveform. So that's an example. Let me get really close to the microphone. This whole time I've been recording, I've been approximately, I would say, not really good with the centimeters, but I'd say probably 30 centimeters from the front of the microphone. Let me get up really close here. Okay, now I'm right on the front of the microphone. And okay, before we play that part back, let me pull that down so that it doesn't hurt your ears. What I'm going to do is actually pull this fader down. So this is the Mac that's playing back right now. I'm going to pull that down so that when we play that part, you can hear that it's clipped when it's playing back, but then we'll try to recover it. So let's go back to that and play that again. Here we go. Okay, now I'm right on the front of the microphone, and we're checking to see if this clips the audio at all, at least if it is brought in initially, if anything's going over 0 dB. I'm going to get pretty loud here, and let's see if that makes any difference. Getting pretty loud right up next to the microphone. Okay, and now... Okay, so let's come in here. Let's just highlight this portion here. It's a little bit hot. Or we could even just go with this portion. And you can see the true peak on that is +8.2 dB. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my... We're in Isotope RX here. And by the way, this recording that you heard just here was made with the Rode NTG5 into the Zoom F3. And I'm going to go ahead and drop the gain by 10 dB here. See if we can recover that. And let's go ahead and play that now. Here we go. I'm going to get pretty loud here, and let's see if that makes any difference. Getting pretty loud right up next to the microphone. Okay, so that's what you can do, the magic of 32-bit float in terms of recovery. So there's a sample there with the Rode NTG5 just to give you a little bit better sense. Another thing that's a factor here is that the line output from the Zoom F3 for the live stream, what you were hearing earlier, again, we're not on the F3 anymore. You're not hearing the F3 right now. The line output was going from the F3 into an ATEM Mini. Not the cleanest input, even though it was set to line level on the ATEM Mini. It still generally has a little bit of its own self noise that it's generating. Okay, Let's go back out to the main camera and see what we've got in the chat here. Linda, it looks like it has a way to feed a strap or belt. Is that true? Yes, that is. I think the idea is that you can actually put it on your belt, or you can get a wrist strap as well if you wanted to do that, which actually is not a bad, kind of a clever idea, actually, if you're booming a mic, or if you're using a little pistol gripped style shock mount to gather sound effects. That could be a really good way to work.
This is related.
Michael, any suggestion on a protective case? Also a strap for putting it on a boom pole. No specific suggestions or experience with any of those. So oftentimes Zoom will make protective cases for their devices. Sometimes it'll take a little while before they come out, but I haven't seen one yet. And other companies may also make some. Vincent says, you think the Bluetooth dongle is secure enough, recessed enough, might not fall out, or not going to fall out? It's not going to fall out, I don't think. We can go back over to the overhead. It kind of snaps in place here. Let me just do that again. Kind of snaps. So I don't think it's going to fall out on its own, but it could get pulled out. It just, to me, does have a little bit of protection. It's like, along here, these stick out far enough to protect it a little bit. But in any case, that's what you're getting. It could get lost. In fact, I will say this. I had to go looking for this when the F3 arrived. I was like, oh, wait, I have a BTA1, the Bluetooth adapter. Where is it? And I had used it with when I did the Zoom PodTrack P4 review, I had one. And I thought, oh, no, I gave that away because I wasn't using it. And I thought, oh no, maybe I gave the BTA1 away. I actually had it in my Zoom F6 because the Zoom F6 also uses that to communicate. If we go to the overhead here, there's a little slot here. It's hard to see in that light, but yeah, this little rubber cover comes off and then the BTA1 goes in there. So I haven't had any major problems with it, but if you're in a bag and things are moving around, I don't know, I would think it'd be pretty good in a bag. But if you're doing a lot of moving around, it's possible that things could get jostled and that could potentially get pulled out. So good question there, Vincent. Daniel, so the Zoom F8N has been discontinued in favor of the Zoom F8N Pro. Looks like it, yes. So the F8N was discontinued just a couple of months ago, it looks like. And the F8N Pro just started shipping. So just got mine. We'll be taking a closer look at that as well. I think the difference appears to be, and I need to confirm this, I literally had about 2 minutes to work with it since it arrived on Friday, but it looks like you can still set the gain and fader on the F8N Pro, which is interesting because that's different than the F6 and the F3. So stand by for that. We'll get you more details on how that works. Air Traffic Media, question F3. How do you like the preamp quality? Any hiss like the H5? Different products I know. Thanks, Charles. No, it seemed much cleaner to me when we played back the audio in Isotope on the Mac here just a minute ago. I'm not picking up a whole lot of hiss. And in fact, if we go back to that, I think we had a 50 hertz high-pass filter on here in terms of the overall audio. It's looking pretty clean. There's not a lot going on there. I think mainly what you're going to hear is your actual room tone. It doesn't look like it's producing a lot of self-noise. So I think it's got the same preamplifiers or very similar preamplifiers to what we had on the Zoom F6 and the Zoom F8, F8N Pro, I assume is the same set of headphones or head preamplifiers, and then also the F4. So they've designed a pretty good good preamplifier there with 75 dB of gain, really pretty clean. And I think they're using the same ones here, I think. So, all right, Michael, any ideas on a time frame for Android support? No idea. I would definitely put your vote in at Zoom support. Zoom has this history. They've started to make some of their apps available for Android, but not all of them. So if you are interested, I would definitely let them know that you have interest in that. Lloyd says, hi Lloyd, I missed the signal chain. How is the SM7B so loud? Are you using a cloud lifter or similar? No, no cloud lifter. So what the F3 does is it has an amplification feature. So you don't have a traditional fader. And in fact, if we go back over to the F3, let me just show that again here really quickly. Okay, we're going to go and get the control app connected here. Just it's a little easier to see on the control app. Come on. It's being a little persnickety. There it is. It's going to take it a moment here to connect. And you will see some signal coming in once it connects. Okay, you can see my signal coming in here, and then we'll go ahead and enable Danny's as well. You're not hearing this right now. Danny can go ahead and talk now.
Hi, I'm talking into the mic now.
Okay, so the difference is here...
It's not.
You're not supposed to hear you. Yeah, we're not
Okay.
actually hearing this. I'm just trying to get levels on the waveform here.
Okay.
So you have this amplification here, which ranges from ×1 to ×1024. And what that does is it just increases the output level of the line out and the headphone out. It does not change the recording level. It is just essentially you can use it like a fader for the line output and the headphone output. So that's how we got it. We had to go to the max setting to make the Shure SM7B work. So we did not need a cloud lifter, but we did need to go to the max amplification setting. So it's a good question, Lloyd. Kind of a different way of thinking of things.
We are at 12:45 and there's still a
Oh
ton of
my.
comments.
We're at 12:45 and there are a ton of comments. Okay, we need to get to our questions that were submitted ahead of time. Let's go take a look at those really quickly. We could go on forever. Jamie asked a question. I'm that whitewater canoe guy who likes to do videos for YouTube based largely on backcountry canoe trips. I'm always trying to find the best way to capture good sound, primarily voice dialogue. However, my secondary is background ambiance when I'm not speaking, things like birds chirping, etc. Use case is somewhat varied since I need to worry about waterproofing. I know my microphone selection is limited with the 3.5 millimeter input. However, not sure if going XLR would help at all or even be possible. I think I can record ambient sound better with XLR mics. So Jamie is talking about the fact that he uses a Zoom F2 as his main device while he's doing his canoe trips and narrating, and wondering if he could get better audio recordings of ambient sounds and things like birds chirping if he used something like the Zoom F3. I think what's going to happen in that case, Jamie, is that, you'll have a selection of a much better set of microphones connected to the Zoom F3. So that would definitely be a step forward. Waterproofing may be a challenge. I don't know how you're waterproofing the F2, but pretty much it's definitely possible. In fact, over on SoundSpeed's channel on YouTube, he's talked about waterproofing before, has some really good tips on how to do some of those things. So he waterproofed I think it was a wireless transmitter or a wireless recorder, like a body pack recorder. So you can definitely take a look at those, and he's got some tips on how to do that. But yes, I think you'd have a selection of much nicer microphones than what you probably have with the Zoom F2, would be my take on that. Okay, next question is from Matthias. Which stereo microphone can you recommend for doc production? I assume that means documentary filmmaking. What do you think about the Audio-Technica 4029? I don't have any answers to this. I have not used that microphone. I haven't used a lot of stereo microphones, to be honest. But if anyone in the chat, in the audience here, has some tips for Matthias, if you'd please share them. Audio-Technica, in my experience, all of the other Audio-Technica mics I've used have been quite good. So I think it's definitely worth a look. But again, if anyone has any tips, please let our friend Matthias know about those. All right, from Florian, would it be possible to make a video about low-cut filters and when to use which? There are so many settings that it confuses me. That could be a great topic for an entire session. But let me just say this, Florian. The idea with a low-cut filter or a high-pass filter, they're basically the same thing with different names, is that if we go back over to the Mac here, let me just show you. This is a view that shows the spectral power over time. So this is time along the x-axis, and the vertical axis, the y-axis here, is frequency. So up at the top, we have 20 kilohertz. These are our very high frequency sounds. On the bottom here, we have our low frequency sounds. And with dialogue, at least, most dialogue for men's voices, for example, doesn't dip a lot below maybe 80 hertz for men with pretty deep voices, maybe 70 hertz for really, really deep voices. And then for women, the fundamentals, the lowest frequencies are often in the 100 and, just above 100 hertz. So what we do with a high-pass filter is a lot of times in a recording, you'll get a recording and there'll be a lot of low energy frequency down here. Whenever the microphone is bumped, whenever there's a plosive, like someone says the letter P and it makes that kind of boom sound in the microphone, that's a puff of air coming out of your mouth and hitting the microphone's capsule. That's a really low frequency thing. That's when it makes sense to use a high-pass filter. And actually, anytime the microphone is moving, there's a chance any of that will get picked up. So what we can do is, let me just go ahead and reset. This is an EQ, but it has a high-pass filter in it. I can go ahead and turn that on. And all it's doing is rolling off or getting rid of some of those really low frequencies. And you can change the frequency at which it starts to filter out the sound. So usually for a high-pass filter, if I don't want to affect a men's voice, I'll usually put it somewhere in the 50, maybe 65 hertz range. I don't generally go a whole lot higher than that. There are these other settings here, and these are just how steep the curve is to roll off the sound. Okay, so that's another setting. I don't know if that's another setting you're seeing, Florian, on your side, if that's of interest, but that's just how aggressive it is in terms of that curve. But any of those are okay, but generally for men's voices, I like to keep it at 65 probably or lower. And then for women's voices, you can go a little higher. Now, if you're dealing with wind, if wind is getting into the microphone capsule and blowing across the capsule and creating just a little bit of distortion, you may have to go higher. And it may affect the quality of the voice recording, but you can potentially manage some of that wind. Now, that's not the ideal solution. You really should use wind protection when you're outdoors, but if for some reason some snuck in there and you just need to clean up a little bit, that can be a solution as well. So that's the kind of the main set of use cases for a high-pass filter. And that's how you would generally use them. So hopefully that answers some of your questions. All right, let's go to the chat. We have a few minutes here and see what we have going in the chat. Any questions about the Zoom F3 or anything else? You can see Danny's microphone boom arm keeps sagging. All right, from Mike. I use the Rode NT4 stereo mic a lot. Very good, but quite heavy. Rode do an adapter kit for the Blimp 2. Ah, very good. And the NT4 can also be battery powered. So that's a good option there as well. Okay, thank you, Mike, for sharing that. Random Geocacher, I like the sound from the very cheap Rode Match Pair pencil mics, M5 or MP or something they are called. They are intended for stereo applications, haven't used a dedicated stereo mic. All right, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate the help of all of you that have used the stereo microphones. The only one I've used is a Sanken shotgun stereo, which was kind of an interesting one. Is there real-time monitoring of the audio from the app as well as from the headphone out of the F3? It is my understanding that there is not monitoring from the app. No. I believe the first one to do that is Tentacle Sync on their Track E recorder. The trick is that there are bandwidth constraints with Bluetooth, and so that gets a little tricky. So as far as I know, and I'll check that in my final review, but I don't believe any of the Zoom apps do that. Good question. The hiss seems to be coming from the SM7B. Is that correct? Probably. Probably so. Just because we're punching up that amplification quite a bit.
This was a question very early on.
Okay, and a question from early in the stream. Have an audition about, or I guess a question about Zoom F2. I recorded a Hans Zimmer concert, and can I clean it up to remove people talking while the music is playing a few seats away and coughs, etc.? Yeah, you could. There's spectral cleanup in, I don't know if that's a question about Audition, but Audition does have a spectral cleanup tool. You can go in and essentially paint out little things. If we go over to the Mac really quickly, I can show here. I could, for example, let's turn on this instant process. Let's We could do attenuate or replace. And what I can do is bring in one of these tools here, like the paintbrush tool. And I can actually, if I saw there was, spectrally, if I saw there was something that was sitting right there, we could do that. I could change this to make it a little more obvious here. If I do that, see how I'm kind of painting it away just gently. It's getting a little fainter there each time. You can do things like that. There's also a spectral repair tool. This is all RX, so I don't know which tool you're working in if you're using Audition. There are kind of basic versions of these tools as well, but you can potentially clean them up somewhat. It's going to affect the sound of the concert most likely, but you can at least reduce the how distracting the coughs and if there are people talking at a Hans Zimmer concert, they need to go out into the lobby. Thank you very much. All right, let's having a hard time accepting 32-bit float only in a recorder. Would like the option to use 24-bit with traditional gain fade limit controls. Yeah, this may not be the one for you. The only exception to you cannot the Zoom F3 can only record in 32-bit float. You don't even have an option to change it to 24-bit. The only way to get it to 24-bit is to use it as an audio interface with your computer or mobile device, and on that device actually switch it to 24-bit. So yeah, so it may not be the right fit for every situation. That's another scenario. I should talk about these a little bit. So the Zoom F3 also, from my point of view, not great if you're going to be doing a lot of quick turnaround things, because again, as I mentioned, whenever you make a recording on the Zoom F3, you are going to have to go into post and change that recording, get the levels where you want them. The only exception to that is if you're feeding audio from the F3 into your camera, and you got the levels pretty close to where you wanted them with the amplification feature, then you'd probably be all right. But workflow-wise, it's really not made for being able to do quick turnarounds from the recordings that are made within the F3, because again, it's 32-bit float. They wanted to keep it as simple as possible while recording, and they're just delaying the process of essentially adjusting the levels to post. So that's a situation where it may not be a great fit if that's not your workflow. So it's a good point, Darren. How is the noise floor? Well, I haven't done extensive testing on it yet, but right now it seems like it's very much in line with the Zoom F6 from my initial tests, so very good is what it seems like so far. I don't have any specific numbers or specific samples to share with you other than this one that we shared on the computer earlier where it looked very clean. Nick, could you record simultaneously to the iPhone and SD card, and would this mute the internal iPhone mics? Continued. Oh, and it's continued. I have yet to find a way to mute the mics on my iPhone and iPad while a mic is connected via a MicPort Pro 3. So Nick, let's go back to the first one. If we can. Let me just answer these in. So yes, you can do both. Let me come into the menu here. Actually, let me jump out of the app. Pull out the Bluetooth card or dongle, menu, and I am going to go down. Here's a USB audio interface, and you can choose whether you're connecting to a Mac or a tablet. If I pop back out, go back into the menu, I believe, no. It's my understanding that you can do both at the same time. Both record on this and send audio, but let's just double check. You can check whether it's linear or float. Let's say float. It's not, I don't actually have USB connected right now, but it looks like you probably can. Oh, maybe not. It's not letting me record. I'll have to check that in my final review. So I'm not really clear on whether you can do both. I have to double check. Thanks for the question. All right.
There's a lot more.
Okay. Telecaster, does the magnification impact recording if you magnify before you start recording rather than during recording? No, it does not. It does not affect the recording level at all, ever, regardless of when you set it. Mike, Superlux do some ridiculously cheap stereo mics, the 523 and 524, punch above their weight. Thanks for that, Mike. So some other options there. When you work with talent who have lots of mouth clicks, what things do you do to minimize that during production? Number one, make sure they're hydrated. I'm getting a lot of mouth clicks from me right now because I'm getting a little dry here. It's especially important that they hydrate, preferably at least an hour before they go on. We run into this issue sometimes at work. When people don't come hydrated, they get a little more mouth clicky. So that's probably one of the biggest things you can do, I'd say. There are some people suggest eating green apples. Some people suggest not drinking coffee close to the start of the session. So those are some things to consider. Also, some people drink tea to help, various like the throat soothing kind of teas. So good question, Doug.
I think you already answered this one.
Navi, can it be used directly with iPad, iPhone? Yes, it can be.
All right. I think.
Another question, is there a tutorial workflow for cleaning up audio on 32-bit files? Not sure if for answered in my earlier question, I recorded a concert on F2 and would like you think I remove purple talking and cough. People talking and cough. Okay. Sorry. Thank you. We have an Isotope RX course. So if you're working in Isotope RX, I would shamelessly recommend that. We do have a variety of videos. I can't think of one where we specifically talk about that at 32-bit float files. We had an older sound for video session quite some time ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, where we did some pretty extensive cleanup, including a mobile phone that went off in the middle of a recording, and we cleaned that up. So those are some examples of what we have available. And I think it's a fine choice. At some point, we need to do more of that.
Okay, last.
Danny says this is the last question.
And it's 2 parts.
And it's 2 parts. From Clement. Would you recommend connect another recorder like Zoom H1N to record a 24-bit track from the F3's output and complement the ability to field record from onboard stereo mics, or should one just go and get a Tascam X8 of that combined capability? Yeah, if you want to use inbuilt microphones, I would probably just get a single device. Things get really messy when you've got a bunch of interconnected stuff in your, especially for handheld recorders. I mean, I guess you could make it work if you could rig it up somehow. I'd probably just get a single device, though, if that's your intent. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us on today's Sound for Video session. We will be working on the review of the F3 here over the next several weeks. It's going to be a bit. I've got a couple other things I have to get taken care of first as far as review commitments, but then we will be coming back to the F3, and probably next week we'll talk about the Zoom F8N Pro. We'll pull that out and take a closer look at that here on the Sound for Video session. So hopefully that'll be of interest to you as well. So get out there and make some great sound, and we'll talk to you again next week. Take care, everybody.